Hello, YouTubers. I want to welcome you to another edition of Bargain Bin Amps. Or really, in this case, Bargain Bin Gear. Okay, now, one of my actually favorite speakers, believe it or not, is a Celestion 7080 speaker. And it's an inexpensive speaker. But for clean sound, it's a real bargain price-wise, and the sound is just fantastic, to my ears anyway. However, online, you should see the amount of hate for this speaker, contempt for this speaker even. I mean, I've read where people say, oh, it's the most non-musical speaker I ever heard. It's junk. It's the worst speaker ever. You know, so much so that you can pick up a Celestion 7080 for maybe $25-$30 in almost brand new condition, because the 7080 speaker comes with many amps, including the Marshall DSL 40. Okay, tube amp, a very popular amp. And I read it all the time that people replace the 7080 speaker solely based on online opinions. Okay? I haven't even tried it. Right? I find that quite ridiculous. Now, I will say that for high gain metal players, distortion, type things, or that kind of thing, there are better speakers. And one of the most popular is the Celestion Vintage 30, about twice the price as a 7080. And to my ears, is a much brighter, kind of brittle sounding speaker to my ears compared to the 7080 on the clean sounds, which to me is really what the 7080 excels at, and distortion maybe not so much, but people have written off the 7080 to a degree it's hard to believe, and I think undeservedly so. Now, online, right, opinions, people have opinions on all kinds of speakers. However, the 7080 is universally hated. It seems like. In fact, just the other day I read somebody saying, oh yeah, it sounds like wet cardboard. Right? Yeah. And if that's the case, I don't think manufacturers would put the Celestion 7080 in their amps if it sounded like wet cardboard. Okay, that's ridiculous. However, going with the online hype, right? If you were to believe all these criticisms of the 7080 speaker, you'd swear it was the worst speaker ever made. And I simply have to disagree with that. In fact, not only that, but I found it very amusing, in fact, that there was a YouTube speaker shootout. And it was trying out 3 different speakers. One was an Alnico speaker. The other was a different Celestion speaker, and then the 7080. And just out of curiosity, I went through the comments, okay, and people were picking the 7080 as the best sound. Now, granted, he was playing clean, which for me is what I like. These days I rarely use distortion to begin with. So I find that very amusing. They actually picked the Celestion 7080 as having the best tone, And I think people were quite dismayed at that and tried to make excuses for it, saying, well, probably the amp was tuned for that speaker, etc., etc. Baloney. No. Simply put, the 7080 is actually a really good speaker, I think. And quite a bargain. And to be frank, I hope that the criticisms on the 7080 continue, so I can pick them up used for $25 or $30. That would be great. Now, recently, there's been a lot of hype, especially online, about the Cannabis Rex speaker. Okay, and the Cannabis Rex speaker is a hemp cone speaker. Okay, and it gets overwhelmingly positive reviews on it, in contrast especially to the 7080 speaker. However, I haven't really seen too many comparisons between the two, Now, the Cannabis Rex is known, at least online, that you put the speaker in and it tames the high end from bright amps, and is also very loud. I mean, 102 decibel rating, right? Sensitivity rating. So in other words, it's a very efficient speaker. But I just couldn't get a conclusive answer. Well, is it better than the Celestion 7080 speaker? Right? Which for clean sounds I really like. So here's what I've done. I couldn't resist. I had to order a Cannabis Rex Eminence speaker, right? And I'm going to compare it to the Celestion 7080 speaker. And this, for me, will answer once and for all, if these online opinions are a bunch of hooey, right? Is it better? Don't know. I'm going to find out here. And I mean, who knows? I may have to eat my words and and say, well, yeah, the Cannabis Rex is better than the Celestion 7080 speaker. Now keep in mind, this is for clean sounds, okay, as you would find in a, a Fender kind of, the blackface amps, the kind of deluxe reverb, the Princeton, the Super Champs, and all that. One thing that really gripes me online is when I'm reading comments in the forums on the 7080 speaker, right? You always get some saps on there saying, oh, it's the worst speaker ever, sounds horrible and things. And then the next comment is, I don't know, I have a 7080 speaker, it sounds pretty good to me. Right? And the Cannabis Rex universally just has a very positive reviews, so this should be very interesting. And since I just got the Cannabis Rex speaker, we're going to have an unboxing. So let's take a look at this. Wow, look at this. I believe this is a Cannabis Rex speaker. Let's find out. We'll have an unboxing here. Okay, so here it is. Here's the Cannabis Rex speaker. And you'll notice it has a big magnet here. And then here, the cone made of hemp is kind of a greenish color. I wonder why. Okay. And, well, this looks very nice. Without a doubt, looks pretty nice. Okay. Now this particular one, Eminence Cannabis Rex speaker, is a 12-inch speaker rated at 8 ohms, and they say it's about 50 watt speaker. Now if you compare that to the Celestion 7080, right, which has a handling capacity of 80 watts, right? So actually the 7080 can handle more power. And to be fair, I have to say I'm somewhat familiar with the Cannabis Rex speaker, only in the sense that I have a Fender Super Champ X2. And while I didn't mind the stock speaker, which was a little 10-inch speaker, right? For the mids and highs, it was okay. A little bright. But it was the low end that I just could not get it not to flub out, It almost made like a, that louder volume is kind of a farting noise. I hate to say it, where it starts to distort and break up. And it wasn't the amp, it was definitely the speaker. And it had, a little small little magnet. So I did replace it with a 10-inch Cannabis Rex Eminence speaker. And I did find that in that particular amp, it fixed that low-end farting, because it had a lot of low-end, and it could handle the low-end better. Didn't fart out, So that's, and the sound was really nice, too. And I'll see, really, once and for all, for me, right, which I prefer, the 7080 or the Cannabis Rex, And is it worth the money to swap it out? Now, keep in mind, the street prices, if you like, on a new Celestion 7080 is about $75. Okay? And the Cannabis Rex is closer to about maybe $110 or $120, something like that. Okay? So let's say maybe a $50 difference between the two. You know, and I mean, I'm generalizing here. So the Cannabis Rex is a little bit more expensive, but not all that much, right? Price-wise. However, because of the, I guess, reputation of the Celestion 7080, the used price on a Celestion 80 is very, very low, right? I mean, people are swapping out the 7080 when they haven't even really tried it out of new amps, you know. I mean, I've read over and over, oh man, my amp came with a Celestion 7080. I immediately swapped it with such and such, you know, different speaker, right? And I think that's maybe why you can find them for you know, $25, $30. However, used Cannabis Rex, I mean, people are definitely trying to get $80 to $90, right? Well, heck, for that price, you might as well get a new one, you know. And not only that, you know, most of the retailers these days aren't charging shipping, whereas on the used ones, people are charging for shipping on top of the price they're asking. In other words, they're trying to get a new price, you know, out of a used speaker. You know, I don't know, I guess if the people want to buy it that way, they can. I don't know, I guess for me, I just got sick of the hype, you know, and not being able to get a definitive answer, you know. And to be fair, you know, to one person it may be the 7080 is a great speaker, to another not so good, and vice versa for the Cannabis Rex. And you know, with YouTube videos, there are so many factors at play. You know, what kind of amp, what kind of cabinet, what kind of recording technique, and that kind of thing. And especially with speakers, it doesn't always translate via video. So the only way that I was really going to find out the truth and be able to compare both speakers is to actually do it myself and try it. And now I have a 7080 speaker in a Seismic Audio 1x12 cabinet, and I really like it. So luckily I have another Seismic Audio cabinet, so I'm going to put the Cannabis Rex in it and then compare the two. And I know there's a break-in period for the Cannabis Rex speaker. So depending on when I do this video, I might do it just out of the box and then later, you know, as it's broken in or what have you. Yes, I finally get to answer for myself the truth between the 7080 speaker and the Cannabis Rex speaker. Now it looks like my cat Middy is a big fan of the Cannabis Rex. Looks like he's already made his mind up. And you can tell because of this. MIDI, what are you doing? So as you can tell, MIDI is in the Cannabis Rex shipping box. Now this is a plus for the Cannabis Rex, and I'll make sure to note that when comparing it to the 7080 speaker. Should be very interesting. Okay, so I'm going to get this installed here and we'll take a listen. Okay, so I installed the Cannabis Rex speaker in a seismic audio cabinet, and I already had a Celestion 7080 in a seismic audio cabinet, and well, tested them out. Okay, here's the Cannabis Rex. Okay, now the Celestion 7080. Keep in mind, online, I read about opinions on the Celestion 7080 speaker, such as 7080's awful speaker, horrible speaker, not very musical, oh, it's super harsh sounding, and then things like, sounds like you're playing wet cardboard. Don't ask me what that's about. Okay, well, I've run the test, and I can tell you what a load of BS. right? I mean, I don't know what these guys are playing, you know, and I have to admit, for high gain, like metal type players, you know, maybe the Celestion 7080 is not the best choice. You know, I mean, I'm sure it does fine. You know, but there are things like the Vintage 30, which actually, to my ears, sounds very bright. And you want to talk about a harsh speaker? To me, the Vintage 30 sounds very harsh and kind of brittle and thin. However, that's on the clean channel, and this is what we're talking about, the clean sounds, okay, non-distorted. You know, because the Vintage 30 sounds great, distorted, certainly, you know. And I mean, don't get me wrong, I'm not knocking the Vintage 30. What I discovered in this test is that really, when it comes down to it, well, they're all, you know, decent speakers, really. You know, I mean, but the criticisms of the Celestion 7080, to me, have been settled with this test. You know, I don't buy it. I don't buy that it's a bad speaker at all. Now, the Cannabis Rex was a fine sounding speaker too. Don't get me wrong. One thing I did notice right off the bat is that the Cannabis Rex is much louder, okay, than the Celestion 7080. I mean, that's a loud speaker. Just to give you an example, it's not very, you know, scientific or whatever, but volume-wise, right, I had another cabinet with a Celestion 7080 speaker, and at the same volume level on my amps, with a little Fender Super Champ X2s, you know, the Cannabis Rex was on volume 3 and was louder. And when I switched it to the Celestion 7080, I had to bring the amp up to 4 instead of 3 on the volume knob to get the Celestion 7080 to kind of match the volume that I heard on the Cannabis Rex. Okay, so it's louder. And I think that's a very good thing for, you know, small amps and things, if you need that volume, certainly. Okay, that's the first thing. Second thing, I was surprised at the Celestion 7080 speaker really kind of having more bass. Not by much, but I could definitely tell a difference. You know, whereas I found the Cannabis Rex was a little tight in the bass, and there wasn't as much bass. Not in a bad way, though. One thing I should say as a disclaimer is that the Cannabis Rex, you know, is not broken in. I mean, this is brand new right out of the box. Okay, whereas the Celestion 7080 has been well worn in, because I play it often. Okay, now how much of a difference that makes, I'm not quite sure. I'm sure the Cannabis Rex will be kind of, you know, sound a little better when it's broken in. I'm sure that has something to do with it. The other thing is, and that may explain it, I discovered that the Cannabis Rex seems a little tighter, or stiff, if you like, right, sound-wise, compared to the 7080, which seemed a little looser, you know, feel-wise. And I'm sure that the break-in period probably has something to do with that as well. Now, the other thing is, I found that the Cannabis Rex has a little more mids than the Celestion 7080. Both speakers had a nice balance, though. And I was a little concerned, just from my experience with a little 10-inch Cannabis Rex speaker that I also have. This is a 12-inch version. I was a little concerned that the Cannabis Rex might sound too scooped or something. Absolutely not. Not the case at all. The other thing is I found that it's a warm speaker just as much as the Celestion 7080 is also a warm speaker. I found them both warmth-wise to be about equal. I did find that the 7080 had a little more sparkle to it, maybe in the high end and some of the mids and things, than the Cannabis Rex did. But the Cannabis Rex has a really sweet, kind of smooth mids and highs. Okay? Another thing I noticed is how similar they are sound-wise. Had I believed the online comments and opinions and things, the Cannabis Rex in theory should blow away the 7080 speaker because it's such a bad speaker, and that's just phony baloney. Not buying it anymore. That's just retardedly wrong. Excuse my French. Okay, and that's just plain wrong. I mean, at least to my ears and my experience now with both. And I think that they're actually both really good speakers. Which surprised me because I was perfectly ready to, swap out the 7080 speaker because the Cannabis Rex would blow it away and that kind of thing. That just wasn't the case, Don't get me wrong, the Cannabis Rex sounds great. Okay, I mean, there's just no problem with it. Very balanced speaker, has everything I look for in a speaker, certainly. However, I was very pleased and surprised that the Celestion 7080 speaker definitely held its own and had an equally nice sound. Surprising, really, quite frankly. And I guess the 7080, is considered this lowly speaker and things. But now I really see why it's in so many different amps, from the Marshall DSL 40, and I've seen it in other amps as well. It's not a bad speaker at all. I think it's quite foolish that these people don't give it a chance. Now, remember, I'm talking clean sounds here, okay? I mean, when I was younger, I guess I played a lot of distortion stuff, but these days I play a lot of clean guitar, clean sounding guitar, if you like. Now this makes the 7080 speaker really a real bargain, for one thing, price-wise, especially used. And I think it's because, again, as I said, a lot of people swap them out. They read the review and go, boy, this speaker I have must be really terrible. And they swap it out and sell it. I think it's, remember that it got so bad that the, Celestion renamed the 7080 to the G12P 80, but essentially it's the same speaker. and it's just not a bad speaker, as people say. I don't know where this opinion comes from, you know, at all. On the other hand, with the Cannabis Rex, right, the Eminence speaker, as I said, definitely louder. Sounds really nice as well, you know. For clean sound, very balanced. I think it's a little more solid sounding, if that makes sense, compared to the Celestion 7080 speaker. You know, maybe just a tad smoother. Remember, it's cutting off a lot of highs there. However, I didn't find it to be a super dark speaker, you know, at all. It can certainly get plenty bright as well. I don't particularly like the super bright, clean sounds most of the time, so, you know, that wasn't really an issue at all. So the truth is, I'd be happy with either one, you know. Quite surprising, I have to admit. You know, because had you believed all the comments, you know, this Cannabis Rex should blow away the 7080 speaker. You know, I mean, I saw a parody where a guy threw one in the trash, you know. And I mean, it's just, I don't know, maybe it's just me, but I just don't hear it as a bad speaker at all. In fact, I think it's pretty darn good, especially for the price, and equally as good as the Cannabis Rex speaker. However, I did find, of course, that, like I said, the Cannabis Rex is louder. And I think the 7080 speaker is a little, I don't know how to describe it, kind of a, not quite as in your face as the Cannabis Rex, you know, is. Part of that is the volume, but I think part of it's the mids as well, you know. Both speakers have a really pleasant sound. You know, now I don't know if it's just fashionable or cool to put down the Celestion 7080 speaker, you know, but I think it's really unwarranted, you know, from my tests here. And as I said, I mean, I'd be perfectly happy with either one, you know. So I guess if this was a boxing match, it'd be close to a draw, really, you know. I don't know, I suppose because the Cannabis Rex is louder, right? So it would win by decision. I don't know. But I'll tell you what. From now on, you know, definitely take comments that you see online in forums and on YouTube and so on. Always take them with a grain of salt. You know. And maybe it's just a style that they're playing. Definitely notice that the amp makes a difference. I have a Marshall 2x12 cabinet with Celestion 7080s. Definitely sounds different in the different cabinet, you know. So all of those things, you know, definitely play a role into the overall sound, I guess. You know, what cabinet it's in, the room and things, you know. how far away you are from the speaker and so on. All those things make a difference. Wow. This was a big surprise, though, for me, you know. Yeah, that they were so similar in sound, you know, quite something. And I like them both. I really can't say that one is much better than the other, really. You know, the Cannabis Rex, I have to say, is quite impressive, of course. You know, and I found this 7080 to be perfectly acceptable as well. Just fine. You know. Okay, well, those are my thoughts on it. I mean, you can leave your thoughts on the speakers in the comments. Alright, very good. See you next time. Okay, bye.